Very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the topic coming up in the subcommittee today. It was interesting to hear the representatives from Nevada testify. Obviously, nuclear fuel and what we do with it affects a lot of congressional districts around the country. Just on the edge of San Diego County is the San Onofre Nuclear Generating Station, one of the more recently shut down locations. We have about 3.6 million pounds of spent fuel in need of safe storage. I think my constituents assert, and I agree, that the current property is not optimal. I also understand that our options to move it are limited. I know that one of the ways to improve the situation is with the preferred location interim storage. It allows us to consolidate some of the on-site storage. 78 sites in 34 states with spent fuel waiting, many in substandard storage, with a growing number of nuclear facilities shutting down. Since 2012, nuclear plant owners have closed or announced the closure of 14 facilities. That includes San Onofre, which hasn't produced electricity since 2012. So moving spent fuel from these sites, especially shut down sites, is not a new idea, but obviously in need of some new momentum, probably. So I had a couple questions, and maybe Mr. Sproat jumping ahead to when Yucca Mountain would be open, say. There's obviously a capacity issue already with it. There's probably not enough space in Yucca Mountain to deal with a lot of the waste that we're talking about moving. How would you prioritize what gets put in? A number of factors you might look at to weigh areas with the most fuel, largest concentration of people in the surrounding region, most dangerous environmental hazards, facilities that have already shut down or been waiting the longest, nature of the fuel. How would you decide what gets in and what doesn't?
Mr. Peters, there's actually within, and my memory here is a little vague. I can't remember whether it's in the Nuclear Waste Policy Act or whether it's in the implementing regulations in the Department of Energy, but there's something called the queue. And it's been in the law from the very beginning, which is oldest fuel gets moved first.
Okay.
And when the liability of the federal government for not complying with the spent fuel removal contracts that all the utilities signed, and that contract required the beginning of moving of that fuel in 1998 from the oldest plants first. The courts have held that the liabilities that the government has is based on when that fuel should have moved based on the plant spot in the queue.
Okay. So
in terms of the format and the regulations, I guess I would say, regarding what gets moved first, that's already been determined in terms of oldest fuel first. So San Onofre 1 would be very high in that queue, for example. Right. Second point I'd just like to make about the capacity of the repository. The Nuclear Waste Policy Act set a limit of 72,000 metric tons heavy metal for that repository. But when the department did the environmental impact statement, we evaluated a higher level, and my notes said it was 120,000 metric tons. So the license application is submitted based on what the law currently says is the legal limit. However, in terms of the EIS, the environmental impact statement, we evaluated 120,000 metric tons, which showed we could take more if that was permitted by law.
that's very helpful. I had another question that no one's raised, and maybe a little out of my comfort zone here, but I understand that the next generation nuclear we've talked about a little bit purports to be more effective at spending more of the fuel, leaving less residual behind to dispose of. Is there any chance that the material we're talking about disposing of today would be useful in that next generation process?
It's very interesting. That topic keeps coming up over and over again over the past couple decades about taking the spent nuclear fuel and reprocessing it and generating more fuel. I'll tell you my personal opinion based on what I know. Number one, it doesn't make economic sense. The business case for doing that doesn't exist. It's very expensive. And number two, the older fuel at this stage of the game doesn't have enough residual energy in it to make it worthwhile anyway. So while I think a number of people would say it's scientifically and engineering possible to do that, I don't think it makes any economic sense.
When you say it doesn't make economic sense, are you comparing it to the use of new fuel? But I understand that, but are you considering the costs that we're incurring to get rid of it? Is that part of the calculus?
Yes, it is, because even if you were to follow the reprocessing process and reprocess some of that fuel, you still have, in some cases, some high level, but a lot of medium level radioactive waste left over that has to be disposed of. So it doesn't all disappear.
All right, okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back. Thank you.